Hello, welcome to my channel, and I am very happy to have you. Today, we are going to be building a fun additive memory game built with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. This game is perfect for beginners to learn web development or for anyone who wants a quick JavaScript challenge. Okay, so how can we actually play this game? To play this game, we have to flip these cards in order to review the emoji. Okay, we have series of emojis, and when you flip these cards, it's going to review the emojis. And the point here is to match all the emoji pairs before the time runs out. Okay, so before the time runs out, you need to match all the emoji pairs. Once you are able to match the emoji pair for a particular level, you are going to be moved instantly to another new level. Each level gets harder with more cards and less time. Okay, trust me, this game is very fun. You can actually challenge your friend, so you can try to see if you can match everything correctly before the time runs out. Now let's actually refresh the browser and start all over again. Oh no, this and this. Great, let's go to level 2. Oh no, this, yes, I think I saw this. No, good. And let's move to level 4. Okay, so in level 4 you have something like this, and the game becomes more complicated because each level gets harder with more cards and less time. Okay, this game is really fun. You can try this out. And guess what? If you check the comment section, you are going to see a link where you can actually have direct access to this game. Okay, when you click on that link, you are going to see the deployed version of this game, and you are going to play the game even before trying to see how the game was actually built. Okay, so check the comment section. You are going to see a link to the deployed version of the game. Trust me, you are going to have fun. And please do not forget to press that like button, because this will make the YouTube algorithm to recommend this game. And if you are new to this community, please subscribe. I will appreciate it if you subscribe to this channel. Thank you so much, and let's jump in and build this project together. For this project, I'm going to be using Visual Studio Code as my code editor. Okay, feel free to use any code editor of your choice. If you're on Windows, simply open your command prompts, and if you're on Mac, you can simply open your terminal. So right here on my terminal, I'm going to navigate to my desktop. I'll simply type cd desktop and hit enter. Currently, I'm in my desktop, and in my desktop, I'm going to create a folder, and I'm going to call this emoji memory game. Okay, so now I'm going to move into this emoji memory game folder, and I'm going to open this folder in my code editor. Great, so this here is the folder I just created. In order not to waste our time, there is actually a starter folder for this project. So check the comment section. You are going to see a link to a particular repo. So when you click that link, it's going to take you to this particular page. Here is the repo for that project. And on this page, you will see information on how to play the game, the features, what you are going to learn by watching this video to the end, and how you can actually access the full code. So you can actually come here and copy this in order to clone the repo. So when you copy this code, you simply open your terminal, and on your terminal, you can navigate to where you want this particular repo to be placed. Okay, so here I will cd into my desktop, hit enter, and here on your desktop, simply type git clone and paste this. Okay, git clone, paste this. Make sure you have good internet connection. Hit enter. This is going to clone this particular repo. Now, if you check your desktop, you are going to see a new folder which is named Emoji Memory Game 2025. So we can see the into Emoji Memory Game 2025. Okay, see the Emoji Memory Game 2025. And now you can also open this folder in your code editor by simply typing code and dots. If this does not work for you, you can manually open that folder in your code editor. Okay, this is the one we created before now, and this is the repo we just cloned. So if you look at this, here you see this starter folder, which is what you have here. The git ignore, this is it, and the readme file. So this is exactly the repo. So what you have here is actually the CSS file. So we don't waste our time writing CSS. And if you go to the scripts, the only thing we have here is just an array. Okay, so here we have an array of emojis. That's all we have. And we are going to build this game step by step from scratch together. This is to solidify our knowledge of JavaScript. Okay, by the end of this video, okay, so by the time you will be watching this video, when you clone this repo, you are going to see another folder here. So you will have starter and final. The final is going to hold the complete code. So once we are done building this project, I'm going to push everything to this repo. So basically, by the time you are going to be watching this video, you have access to the complete code. But I will advise you to only work with the starter file, see how this is done step by step, and try building it on your own. Okay, so let's go and do this. So let's actually push this aside and let's go back to this particular folder, the folder we created. So here, let's create a file and let's call this index.html. Okay, and now by the help of Emmet, let's actually generate the HTML boilerplate. So simply type the exclamation mark, hit tab or enter. Let's change the title to Emoji Memory Razor. And inside the body, let's add h1. And for this, let's simply say Emoji Memory Raise. After the h1, let's add a div. And for this div, let's give it an ID of level. Okay, let's add another div with an ID of timer. Another div with an ID of game board. And finally, let's add the last div with an ID of message. Okay, this is going to display the message. And let's add a button to restart the game. So let's give this an ID of restart btn. Good. Now, after the button, just add a script tag. And here, let's add a source. So in here, let's create a file and let's call this scripts.js. Okay, so back in our HTML file, just type dots and backslash, bring in the script.js. The next thing we are going to do is to add another file, and this is going to be styles.css. Okay, and now let's go back to our HTML file and bring in that particular file. So we can close this part here. After this, before the title, add link tag. Okay, and this should be /styles.css. Okay, now let's open this project in a web browser. So for this particular project, I'll be using an extension, and that extension is called Live Server. Okay, open this first option and install Live Server. Once you install Live Server, you are going to see an option down your code editor. You are going to see Go Live. Click on that Go Live. So that opens our project in a web browser. Okay, now we don't have to waste our time. Now, what I want you to do is to go back to that repo you cloned from GitHub and let's copy our CSS. Okay, let's copy the styles. The goal of this course is to actually master JavaScript and not to teach CSS. Okay, so just go to that repo and copy the styles. So here, if you're Mac, press Command A to highlight everything. If you're on Windows, that should be Control A. And to copy it, press Command C or Control C. So we can now close this, come here and press Control V or Command V. Okay, so let's save that. And now we have this. Okay, great. We are done with the HTML and we are done with our CSS. Let's go to the main business of this project, which is actually JavaScript. Okay, so the first thing we are going to do is to still go back to that repo and let's copy the arrays of emojis. We don't have to waste our time typing emojis, because here we have several emojis. Let's open that folder, go to this script.js and simply copy this. So let's go back to our project and here press Command V to paste that. Okay, so here we have an array of emojis. So the next thing we want to do is actually to declare the necessary variables. This project is going to be very simple. So we need a variable to hold the level. Okay, we need a container to hold the grid size. Remember, if you move from level 1 to level 2, so let's restart this. Okay, so let's try matching this. Oh no. Okay, so you see, once you go to level 2, the grid size changes. So basically we need a variable to hold the level, the grid size, a variable to hold each emoji, a variable to hold the first card, the time left, level, time limit. Okay, so let's actually go and declare these variables. Okay, so the first one should be level. Let level be equal to 1. So the default level is actually 1. You see, the default level is 1. So let's level be equal to 1. And we can say let's grid size, let's emojis. And in JavaScript, there is a way to actually declare all these variables once. Okay, instead of using let's, we can do something like this. Let level be equal to 1, comma. Then here we can say grid size, emojis, first card, lock, comma, matched pairs, comma, timer int, and finally we have total flips. Okay, so we end this here with semicolon. Let's actually close this side. Okay, so you can toggle this here. So here we say let level be equal to 1. Let's grid size, let emojis, let first card. For the level, we declare and we initialize it. We assigned a value. Here we are yet to assign any value to this. Okay, so let me show you something. Let's console.log level and let's check this in the browser. Okay, and in order to see this in our web browser, you can actually click on these 3 dots. Okay, remember this should be on our own project, the one we are working on, not on the finished project, the one we are working on. Go to these 3 dots and go to more tools. You see these developer tools. Click on developer tools. You can also open the same thing by pressing Command Option J if you're on Mac. On Windows, I think that should be Control Option J. Okay, so here you see that we have one. This one is coming from script.js. It's coming from our JavaScript file, line 43. When you go back here, you see this is line 43. Now, let's see something. Let's console.log. Here we can actually add the label. Here, let's say grid size. So when you console.log the grid size, because the grid size here, we are yet to assign any value to the grid size. The grid size should actually give us undefined. So when you console.log grid size undefined, you see the value of our grid size is undefined. So when you console.log any of these one, you should actually get undefined. So in JavaScript, we can actually use this shortcut to define variables once. Okay, so let's actually remove these consoles. We don't need them. Okay, the next thing we want to define is actually the time left and the level time limits. Each level has a time limit. So here, let's time left, then level time limit. Okay, so the next thing we want to do now is actually to access each of these things here. We need to access these divs and the button in our JavaScript. Okay, remember DOM manipulation. So let's see how we do this. So here, let's actually define a variable and let's call this level div. Okay, so this is going to be for this level. We define a variable for each of these ones. Okay, so the level div is going to be equal to document dot, let's use get element by id, and we'll simply have to put the name of the id. For this one, it is level. Okay, so here we simply put level. Next, let's bring in the board, const board. This should be documents. This should be documents dot get element by id, and that should be board. The next one is the timer div. Timer div documents dot get element by id. This, the id is actually timer. Okay, so this is timer. And for the board, the id here is actually game board, not board. So you can simply copy this in order not to make any mistake and put that here. Okay, and the next one is the message div. Message div document dot get element by id, that we gave an id of message. And finally, we need access to this button. So I will copy this id, and here let's simply use restart button. Restart btn is equal to documents dot get element by id restart btn. Okay, the next thing we want to do now is actually to see how we can access, to see how we can assign time to each level, and we are going to use a function to do that. So we call this function get time limit, the time limit for each level. Okay, and this particular function is going to take in level. So here we are going to check if the level, that is, if this level is equal to 1, we are simply going to return 20. Okay, next we check if level is equal to 2. If level is less than or equal to 3, that is, if level is equal to 2 or 3, we are going to return 30. Next we check if the level is less than or equal to 5. Here we simply return 50. Next we check if the level is less than or equal to 8. Let's return 60. And finally, we are going to check if level is less than or equal to 10. Here we are going to return 80. Okay, as we are simply going to return 120. So this is going to be the function to manage the time limits for each level. Next, we need a function to handle the grid size. A function to handle the grid size. Okay, so here you see that the grid size changes. So let's actually do that. Function get grid size. Okay, and you see as the level increases, the grid size also increases. So let's check if this function also is going to take in level. And here we're going to check if the level is less than 2. Let's refresh this. You see that for level 1, the grid size is actually 2 by 2. So we check if the level is less than 2, we return 2, 2. Okay, so if the level is less than 4, here we are going to return 3 by 2. Okay, now let's check if the level is less than 6, we are going to return 4 by 3. Okay, and if it is less than 9, that is 6, 7, 8. So if level is less than 9, for this we are going to return 4, 4. And finally, we check if it is less than 12. If level is less than 12, we are simply going to return 5, 4. Okay, so this is what we are going to have. If it is 12 and above, we are simply going to return 6, 5. Okay, good. The next thing we now want to do is how to pick the emojis. We need a function to handle the selection of emojis. Okay, so let's actually do that. Function pick emojis, and this function is going to take in the pair counts. Okay, so we define an array to be equal to let new emojis. Okay, so this particular array is going to store our choosing emojis. Okay, so the point here is that we want this function to randomly pick a set of number of unique emojis. Okay, so we want to pick a set of unique emojis from the list of our emojis, from these emojis here. Okay, so let's say you need 4 pairs of the current level. So that is 4 different emojis. This function will randomly pick 4 unique emojis from our emoji list, and when you choose any emoji, the function removes each choosing emoji from the pool, so you never get duplicates in your game, okay, except for the intentional pair. Okay, so that is exactly what the function does for us. Now we want to loop through this function. So let's say for let I be equal to 0, because an array is 0 index, right? So I less than pair count I plus plus. Okay, so const index math dot floor. Since we want random emoji, we are going to use the inbuilt math random function. Okay, this should be multiplied by emoji array dot length. So we'll now pick the new emojis, and we are going to push emoji array at that particular index. Okay, emoji array, and we are going to splice out dot splice the index, 1 at 0. So we are removing the emoji at this particular index from the array. Okay, and we are adding it to the new emojis. Okay, that is why we use dot push here. And after that, we simply want to return our new emojis. Okay, the next thing we want to do is to write a function that actually makes it in such a way that the pairs, okay, aren't always in the same position. When you refresh this page and you try playing this game, you get different things, and the pairs are not always in the same position. Okay, so we need a function to write. We need a function that randomizes the order of the item in our array. Okay, so that is exactly what we want to do. So now let's add a function, and let's call this shovel. So this function is going to take in an array, and let's loop through the array and actually shovel the array. So let I be equal to array dot length minus 1, I greater than 0, I minus minus. Okay, and let j be equal to math dot floor math dot random multiply by I plus 1. Okay, so here now let's have array at I, comma array at j to be equal to array at j, comma array at I. Okay, and finally we simply want to return the given array. Okay, so basically the function takes in this array and actually randomizes the order of the array. Okay, so the next thing we want to do is to create a particular function to start each level. So let's say function, and here we defined this particular lock, which is currently undefined. Okay, so let's set lock to false. Let's set the total flips to 0, because initially we are yet to flip anything. Let's set the match test to 0. Okay, because at the beginning of the game there is nothing yet. Let's set the message div dot test content to be equal to nothing. Okay, so that should be equal to an empty string. Let's grab the restart button dot style dot display we set the display to none. Okay, let's go back to our game. This restart button, we want to set the display to none. Okay, and let's actually call this function so that we'll start seeing something here in our screen. Let's shift this to one side, and here let's simply call start level. Great. So here you see now that restart button, we already set display to none. If you remove this, you should actually see the restart button again. So let's bring that back. Okay, now let's actually define rows and columns. So we say cos comma rows to be equal to get grid size. And for the get grid size, remember the grid size which we defined above expect a parameter. Okay, so we are going to pass that argument. We are going to pass that as the argument here. Now let's take the grid size, and this should be equal to our cos comma rows, and we take our level time limit, and let's set this to be equal to get time limit, and here we simply pass in our level. So initially the time left is going to be equal to the level time limits. So let's access the level div dot test content. This should be equal to, okay, so here we can use the backticks, and here let's say level. Okay, and now we want to put in JavaScript, so this should be our level match all. Okay, so something like level 1 match all pairs. Okay, so this should be match, not math. Let's access the board dot style dot grid template columns. This should be equal to, let's use the backticks again, and we are going to use the repeat. Okay, so we are using the repeat CSS function, and it should repeat the columns time. Okay, so the number of columns, comma 60 pixels, and let's pass be equal to math.floor. So we take the columns, multiply that by rows, and let's divide this by 2. And now let's access our emojis, and this should be equal to pick emojis, and pick emojis is expecting the pairs. Let's define cards. This should be equal to, let's call the shovel function, and let's pass an array. Okay, comma same emojis again. And remember, this here is our emojis, the emojis we have here. Okay, okay, so let's grab our board.inner HTML. Let's assign this to an empty string for now, and let's now go through the cards for each. Okay, so we are going through this particular cards for each emoji. Then we need access to the index. What do we want to do here? Let's actually define a card here to be equal to documents dot curate elements. So we want to curate a div. Okay, so what we are trying to do is curating each of the div here. Okay, now card dot class name should be equal to card. Okay, there is an error here in our console, cannot access J before initialization. Let's go back to the shovel function. Okay, no, this actually we have to push this down. Okay, and here simply add semicolon. Okay, and remove this particular bracket, remove this here, and save this. Okay, so remove this here, remove this, and also remove this. I think this is the prettier. This is prettier. Okay, so save this. It should be an array. Okay, where the first item is array at I, the second one is array at J, and this is equal to array at J, comma array at I. Okay, so make sure your function looks like this. Save the file and go back to the browser, refresh the page. Okay, now this is another error. Cards dot for each is not a function, and that is actually correct. Look at this. For each, this is actually not a JavaScript function. So let's go back to what we are doing. This is for each. Okay, if you go back to your console, the error is gone. Good. Now we can continue. Debugging is actually part of programming and is actually a very important aspect of coding. Great. So let's go back here and continue with what we are doing. So the card class name is equal to card. What we are doing is actually assigning. If you go to the styles.css, click on type command F, and here simply type card. So we have some styles for this, for the small cards, this particular div, this card here. Okay, so that is the style we are actually assigning to the card here. Good. Let's continue. Next, let's grab the card dot data set, okay, dot index. This should be equal to I. That is why we accessed this index. Next, we want to grab card dot data set dot emoji, okay, data set dot emoji. The emoji should be equal to this particular emoji, which is this one here, okay. And next, we want to grab card.text content. The text content for now, that should be equal to an empty string. So now let's grab card.add event listener. Okay, we are adding event listener because when you click on this, let's restart this. When you click on this, something happens. Okay, so this is actually listening to a click event. So card.add event listener. And as I just said, this should be a click event. And what should happen when this happens? Here we want to call a particular function. Okay, so we want to call a function and we don't have the function yet. So one thing we can do is to come out of this particular function, the start level function, and let's actually define a function, because we also need to bear in mind how to write clean code. I don't want to add that function here because we can actually do something like this function and we can write our function here, and we can also use an arrow function. Okay, so we can do something like this, and here we can add our function, but I don't want to do any of this for now. Let's remove this. Let's actually add another function here, and let's call that undo flip. Undo flip. And here we'll first want to check if block. So if block is true, simply return. Don't do anything. Okay. If the game is locked, we don't want to do anything. So const card, this should be equal to event. So that means here we need access to the event. So we say event dot target. So card is equal to event dot current target. So if the card dot class list dot contains flipped, we simply want to return. Okay, next we want to take the card dot text content, and this should be equal to card dot data set dot emoji. And after this, we want to take the card in the class list. Let's actually add the flipped. So if the card contains a class flipped, we don't do anything. Otherwise, we change the text content of the card, we set it to the emoji, and also in the class list we add the flipped class. Okay, and now we need to increase the total flips. The total flips, then plus. Okay, also we need to do a check. So we need to check if not first card is equal to card. Okay, else lock becomes true if first card dot dataset dot emoji is equal to card dot dataset dot emoji. Okay, if this is true, we want to take the first card dot class list dot add matched. Okay, and also card dot class list dot add matched. And now the matched pairs should actually increase. So we take match pairs plus. And next we set the first card to null. Okay, and after that we set lock to false. And now we now check if matched pairs is equal to emojis dot length. So we actually end that particular level. So here we need to define a function to handle that. End level. We don't have this particular function yet, so we are going to define that. So here we simply say true. Okay. So here now let's add a function, and we are going to implement it later. So function end level, and this function will be expecting true or false. Okay. So let's simply say success, either true or false. Okay. So if this is not true, let's simply say else. Let's set timeout. We call the timeout function. And here we simply want to take the first card, and we set the text content to an empty string. We take the card itself. We also set the text content to an empty string. First card dot class list dot remove flipped. We do the same thing for the card dot class list dot remove flipped. Then we set the first card to null. We set lock to false, so this game can continue. Okay, and this time interval should be, let's use 700 here. Okay, so now let's actually take the restart btn dot on click. Okay, good. Now we are done implementing the undo flip function. So let's go back to the start level function we are implementing. Remember, we started this function here. Okay, so we want to reference this function here, so that whenever this button is clicked, this function is being called. Okay, so now after this click, let's now add. Remember, the add event listener takes in two things, and that is why when you go back to your browser, there is actually an error. To execute add event listener, two arguments is actually required. Okay, so now we need to call this undo flipped. Okay, and this is how we reference the undo click. We do not add this, no, because we do this so that whenever the button is clicked, this function is actually called. Okay, and after this, we now want to take our board dot append child. So we are going to append the card. Good. And now we have this. I don't know how you feel, but this here is actually amazing. This is actually amazing. We need to complete this game because now we need the timer and also the message and restart button. Okay, so let's go straight and complete that. Good. So let's actually implement the timer before the end level. Okay, so let's say function start timer, and here we simply need to call the clear interval, and we need to pass the time int. Okay, the timer int we defined before. Then let's now call the timer div dot test content. Okay, because we need to see the time now. Let's set this to be equal to, let's use backticks. Okay, so time left, and now let's take the time int. This should be equal to set interval. Okay, and the set interval actually expects a callback function, and in here we want to take the time left, and we are going to reduce that so that the time is going to be counting downward. Okay, so timer div dot test content is equal to time left. Okay, so here let's pass the time left. Okay, and now we want to check if the time left, if time left is less than 0, so we don't get negative time. Okay, so if time left is less than 0, let's call the clear interval, and we are going to clear, and here we are going to pass the time int, and end level, here we are going to pass us. Okay, and this should happen every 1000 milliseconds. Good. And the point now is, where exactly are we going to call this start timer? We are going to call this start timer inside this start level. Okay, so inside our start level, immediately after this particular line, let's simply call the start timer. Okay, and let's save this. Now you see we have this time and it is actually working. The next thing we need to do is actually something to end the level. Okay, so we need to implement the end level function. And this is going to be very simple. So first, let's clear the interval and let's pass the timer int. Let's set log to true. Okay, so we set log to true to prevent further flips. Okay, so if success, we want to take the message div and the inner HTML, let's change that to a success message. Okay, let's actually add HTML tags here. So we say level and let's pass the level complete. Okay, so here let's also show the time left, and here we simply bring in the time left. Okay, and also we can show the flips, how many times. Okay, so here we simply say total flips. Okay, and after this we simply want to set timeout. We increase the level. Since level 1 was completed successfully, we increase the level and we now call the start level function again, so that the start level function will start the next level, and this should happen every 1500 millisecond. Else we take the message div dot inner HTML. Okay, and here we simply want to say time up, and after this we simply say you didn't finish in time. So let's add the line break and let's say try again. Okay, and now we want to take the restart button dot style dot display. Let's set this to an empty string. Okay, good. Now let's actually remove this and let's put it here in the last line. Okay, and before this, let's take the restart btn dot on click. So whenever we click on this restart btn, we actually want to call the start level function, so that we actually start the game all over again. So let's test what we've done. We can close this. This is our own implementation. You can try this now. So let's see. Here we get this particular message and we are moved to another level. Let's see what happens if we do not finish this game on time. Let's see what happens if we do not meet up with the time. And here you see time's up, you didn't finish in time. And now when you click on restart, it starts this particular game all over again and you can continue from the level you stopped. Please, if you have any question, ask in the comment section. And I will see you in the next one. Bye and one love.